Hello, welcome back to BlenderSushi Live Noding. In this video, I'm gonna explore Blender armature and bones, especially the post bones using Sverchok. Previously, we tried using animation nodes and then it works, but I think I have this desire to use Sverchok because it feels a lot simpler if you have like a lot of bones and then you want to control armatures. If you have multiple armatures and multiple bones, it gets quite complicated if you use animation nodes, at least at the moment. So let's see, this is Sverchok bones, simple. So how do we do that? I'm gonna start from scratch. So basically just have a single armature. If you wanna follow through, a single armature with a single bones, okay? You need a little bit of familiarity with the Blender armatures. I know just the very basic, so but I think it should be enough for this one. Now we have an armature with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bones, and we can edit it in any way we like. We can actually just keep it at the default position for now. And you know that for animators to animate bones in Blender, they need to go to pose mode, and they animate it while it's a blue color like this, and they can transform the locations, they can play around with the rotations, which is default by in quaternion, and then they can also scale in the Y basically, because X and Z is fine but not so common. Normally squash and stretch happens like that. Anyway, so let's open up Sverchok and then have a look. Now the one that we're gonna use is the object ID nodes. So any object ID nodes capable of doing something with bones, and it can get quite interesting. So object ID get, by default it's gonna get all the mesh objects in the 3D scenes. We can switch to armature. So the mode itself is still objects, the type of armature. So it's almost like if you use the Blender Python BPY and then kind of go to under objects, and then you kind of get the armature. I'm gonna put this inside a variable called arm. So armature, now we are actually working on the armature itself. We can go to the pose. I think there's a pose bone somewhere. Yeah, there's a pose, and then there's a bones. This is actually what we want, and you can see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bones that we can work with, and for each bones we can control the location XYZ, and then there's also scale, of course, and then maybe rotation. The rotations have few different ones: axis, angle, Euler, quaternion. The modes, we need to change it at some point. Okay, anyway, let's try something like let's try moving the bones in a pose. So we grab this armature. Apparently this one actually will grab all the armatures in the scene if you have multiple armatures. Currently we only have one, but just in case, we're just gonna filter it out. Type it armature. So this will filter out just armature with name armature. And then the next thing we want to do is to set. We're gonna set the pose bones. So it's gonna be pose with the objects coming from this guy. So this seems to fail. Maybe pose bones. Okay, it works like this: objects, armature, pose bones. Let's use the stethoscope and check So we have bpy.data objects armature pose bones bone 0, 0. That's a weird naming. It's really weird. Maybe we can check it out. I think the bones names looks weird here, but it should be correct anyway. For the bones, we want to, let's say we want to scale it. So we're gonna create another set mk2 here and plug in the output values into this guy, I believe, and then type in scale. The value, let's use our own value, vector in, and yes, so you can see it now. We already have control over each and every bone scaling. Okay, that's the first. And of course this is a single value, but it works on all of them. But if you have like multiple value, like let's try random vector 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we have 5 random vector on the scale, and then we can randomize the seed, and you can see the bones all keep changing in a scale. Okay, that's good. This is actually what Sverchok currently doing, is modifying the bone in post mode, and what we are looking currently is the result of the post bone modifications in the transform. The next thing we like is to modify the bones rotations. Okay, so this guy plug it to that guy, and the rotations, if I just type in rotation Euler, apparently it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Why is that? Because if you go to edit mode and check, actually go to post mode and check the rotation, it's not Euler, it's quaternion. So they have axis angle and then all these different kind of Euler and then quaternion. Whenever we change that, different rotations will appear here. What we want is really rotation Euler, so that we can control it from here. But we want to change it for each and every bone. You see, by default it's all quaternion, W, X, Y, Z. So we can apparently change the rotation type in here. So this is an interesting little trick that I learned from Blender developer Kosvor. Rotation mode. So if we type in rotation mode and then type in here XYZ and just plug this guy in there, it will change all the rotations into Euler. This is really like super handy, you know, and we just can keep it up here. So this is all nodes and everything is quite logical. See, we are changing the rotation mode to XYZ here, and we just keep it like that. Maybe frame it, don't change unless you want it to change it. Scale is what you want to change, rotation Euler what you want to change. So you have control over the scale, rotation. Maybe the next one is location. Do we have location? Maybe, yeah, we do have location. Zero it out. Now with the post bone, we notice right away it's there is something interesting about it. Each and every bone has its default position, and its default position, rotation location, like the default transformation of the bones is controlled by the edit. So if I move this bone number 4 somewhere over there, go back to this guy, you see the post bone modification of location is just the offset from the original, which is really handy. If you're like an animator and you want to kind of move the bones, you can move it in edit mode and then kind of still have the animations, and the post bone itself is just the offset of the original bone position in edit mode. So that's an advantage for us. We can control the location. So this we have control over each bone, scale, rotations, and locations. Maybe I'll switch them around. It's always like translation, rotation, and scaling. Very important. Let's do it like this. Okay, and currently they're just like single vector value controlling bones. Because you can always randomize using random vector, for example. Random vector, we have 5 bones here. Files fs. The count of the bones itself can come from this guy right here. So if we use list length and find the number of bones, we will see it's 5, and we can use that number for our count. Now I can use this random vector mk2, which will output like a number of vector numbers here that we can just plug into our location. Okay, randomize the seed. You see, so it's animating. It's actually animating, and then you can have another one for rotation. Rotations and random, always quite interesting. And then one more for the scale, even though for the scale really we don't want to randomize the X and the Z, perhaps just the Y. We can use let's say for the Y, just use random number generator. Integer or float, we like float, and random number between somewhere between low and high number here. The size is the count, so just plug this into the Y. Now we can have the bones with random length, and they are actually animating. And then the reasons I like bones is just because bones or skeleton or armature, it's like it's one of the best, the most powerful deformer out there for animating objects, deforming and animating objects. It's something that I always like to do because originally I was an animator, and I like the potential of skeleton to do all kind of animations. Even though we are doing it procedurally, it doesn't need to be procedural. It can be of a kind of it can be blended and mixed with manual animation. I don't mind manual animation, it just feels too tedious for me after a while. So yeah, that desire to animate procedurally is why I really like to understand bones using Sverchok. Maybe that's for future live noding. It's gonna be all about procedural animations. It's the hardest. I say it's the hardest. Why it's animating is the hardest? Because to be really good animators, you need to, especially in computer graphics, you need to understand both technical and also timing and kind of that feel of like a good motion. It's not easy. You can't teach that. It's just something you spend a long time. Just like when you're maybe modeling or rendering, it's easy to teach people how to use a tool, but to make it look good, it's something else. Anyway, scale. So yeah, we have control over everything basically. if I go to edit mode, I'm just curious. The edit mode is something I am still do it by hand. I think we can actually do it using Sverchok. I don't know yet. So the edit mode has this head and tail for each and every bone. So that's for normal bones though. If you are using like a B bones or the bendy bones in Blender, you have something else altogether. So yeah, if you plug the frame into the seed here, you will have like a crazy kind of bone. Random rotation, whoops, just now it's frozen. Random rotation, random scale in Y, and the position is pretty much the same. There's maybe the scale. Anyway, the cool thing about this is now if I just make a duplicate of this multiple times, how many bones we have? Let's check it out. We have 80 bones now, 80 bones. And update it in object mode. Now we have some crazy bones. Normally this is, I don't know, it's not easy to do in many other packages, but it makes it, Blender and Sverchok makes this so easy. It's so easy. Objects, grab all the armatures and then filter out armature, name armature, and then for every post bones just do something with the attributes. It's super simple. I can't emphasize more. And what's cool about bones is, you know, I was thinking, I found out, okay, with a mesh, if you have like more than 1000 mesh objects, Blender will start to slow down, okay? But if you have a single object with a billions of mesh vertices, Blender can still handle it quite easily. Let's say if I use Sverchok to animate like billions of vertices, maybe it slows down but still faster. But instead of animating billions of vertices, it's easier and actually more manageable to animate maybe 100 or 1000 bones. So just a lot of vertices. If you deform it, just deform it using like a bones, a single armature bone, a single armature with a multiple bones, maybe 100 to 1000 bones, you can still control it. Actually, if you have like a big number like this, 10,000, it's start to get impossible for our brain to handle it anyway. 1000 bones, and then you can control these billions of vertices. So the idea is, if you have multiple characters and then with this guy instance being animated using these bones, I don't know, maybe procedurally, and then you use all this as an instance. Now instance also like the magic thing that you can use with particles. So this is when everything that's complex get together, and then you can have billion of characters, everything's animating, and it starts to become like a noise if they are not in control. But anyway, you don't, it's heading to like a crowd simulations. Crowd can be interesting, not always, but if you want to see like a lot of people doing some interesting thing, not like in a soccer or footy stadium, that's kind of okay, but still pretty boring. You look at the nature and look at animals. If they have thousands of animals can do interesting stuff that a human cannot do. But if I think one a big example of interesting crowd is when they have like a stage performance. That's still interesting to watch because it's nice. I remember at the Beijing Olympic 2008, when the China held the Olympic, they have like this hundred, I think thousands of people performing acrobats and then etc. There, I think they use Houdini to plan all this kind of intricate dance, and I don't know, like all kind of what do you call it, dance, and there's a term for it, but anyway, to make everything is in synchronized to the music, and then they're performing. That's hard. That's something that hard to do, and you will see that if you watch the Beijing Olympic, just the opening of Beijing Olympic 2008, 3 hours or 6 hours, you watch it on YouTube, and then you look at how people moves, how they kind of animating in motions. That's all procedural, and yeah, that's something I'm thinking to do. If not like a human bipedal, mechanical, or like animals, creatures that does interesting motion is worth learning and try to recreate using Blender. Okay, anyway, that's a short lecture about bones, and this is just still touching the simple bones, just the scale, rotation, Euler, and locations. But you can try to move the bones like in sine wave or things like that. Just a simple bits, little bit bits by bits, and then let's see what you can come up with. Anything you try recreate all you have learned up until today using Sverchok or animation nodes and Blender. Anyway, that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, suggestion, just leave it down below. Let me know, and yeah, I'll see you in the next live noding video. Thanks again for tuning in.